Welcome everyone to our Rosterfy Lunch and Learn webinar. My name is Kelsey, and with this series, we intend to support you with all the amazing work you do by inviting along thought leaders in the volunteering space to have an insightful conversation over your lunch break. Very excited to welcome Billy Moran. Billy is a conservation specialist with nearly a decade of experience in environmental restoration and volunteer leadership. Currently managing the City of Parramatta's expansive bush care program, Billy leverages a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Management and Digital First Systems to move council programs beyond manual admin towards measurable community and ecological impact. Woof! Welcome, Billy. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Amazing. So before we kick off, of course, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today as well. Now, just quickly, for those of you who aren't aware of Rosterfy, we've been around for about 8 years now, and we're used by over 5 million volunteers and staff globally. We've recently ticked over 150 million hours of volunteering powered by Rosterfy across 35 different countries, and we're all about connecting communities to events and causes that they are most passionate about. So across Australia and New Zealand, councils are the heartbeat of our communities. But behind the scenes, managing volunteers across multiple departments is often a manual juggle of spreadsheets and fragmented data. And these are some of the city councils that Rosterfy supports across the world to help take their volunteer programs to the next level. But conscious today that we only have a short amount of time, so looking to kick off, a little bit of housekeeping. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see there's a messaging box in there and then a question box as well. Feel free to use either if you have any questions as Billy and I continue the conversation and you want to drop them in there. We will circle back around at the end of the conversation. But today we're talking about being brave enough to evolve. We're exploring how a single source of truth transforms local government, moving from administrative burden to world-class efficiency. So in the session today, we're covering scaling sustainably, so growing your program without adding to your admin load, automating compliance, so managing WWCC, age-gated onboarding and credentials with total confidence, and quantifying impact, so turning volunteer hours into data-driven stories for your community. So kicking off with our first question, Billy, for a large-scale program like Parramatta Bush Care, what were the specific administrative bottlenecks that were preventing your team from spending more time on actual environmental restoration?
Yeah, so there were three main areas that we were really looking to reduce the admin load on. So onboarding new volunteers was a big one. We were finding that we couldn't recruit as much as we wanted to because we were spending so much time bringing in our new volunteers. We were finding that the on-site reporting was really challenging, and we couldn't really expand our program because we needed to be spending so much time going through our reporting requirements, and also managing the sort of whole life cycle of the volunteer from like first onboarding also to when people were leaving the program. We found it hard to keep track of who was active and who had sort of maybe stepped away, and we needed to pull back from communicating to.
Right. So no real sort of offboarding process, and then no way to sort of to know who you needed to maybe reinvigorate before they offboarded.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Awesome. And many councils struggle with fragmented data. So how does centralising into a single version of truth change the way you view your total volunteer workforce for your bush care program?
Well, for us, when we moved to Rosterfy, it's been so handy to be able to just see everything a person's account has gone through on their journey as a volunteer. And it's made it really easy to segment our volunteers. If we need to like communicate to a specific group of people, we just have that data available and we can say, oh, the people that satisfy the requirements of being from this area or perhaps have been to this many days, it's really handy to have all that data at your hands to be able to use however you need. Yeah, it's really useful.
Yeah, and I think so many people, so many other organisations, whether or not in local councils or not, have said to us, it's been so insightful to see what we thought we knew proved wrong about our volunteers. Like we had all these, misconceptions, I suppose, about who our volunteer, what our volunteer program was made up of, and what these people look like and how many hours they did, and then actually having the raw data all in front, taken from a variety of different places, pulled together, actually told them a very different story. And there's a lot of power in that knowledge, right? Of actually being like, here's what we're working with, and here's actually where is worth investing into, and here's how we can expand. And it really helps to pave the way forward as to where your program is actually heading, and what to do next.
Yeah, definitely. It was really helpful to us to, like, for example, like last year at the end of the financial year, I did an audit of every source of promotion for where our volunteers have come from, and then cross-reference
Yeah,
that to had they actually shown up and how many times they've shown up. And so
yeah,
we're really figuring out which platforms for marketing are not just getting us people to sign up, but also converting that interest into actual hours on site and work on the ground. And that's been really
yeah.
helpful to sort of focus our efforts with that data.
100%. And I think when you're evolving as you do every single year, you can sometimes get stuck in thinking that things were one way as they've always been. And actually, 5 years on, things look a lot different. And being able to have that view is where the power is to go, actually, things are changing a lot. And here's where we should be focusing on our recruitment drive. I think that's really powerful. So speaking about that, when we talk about strategic onboarding, we often focus on speed. And so how has automating credential verification reduced your time to site for new volunteers without compromising the safety protocols that you have?
Yeah, so in our onboarding, speed was definitely like really important, but also we do ask for things as part of our onboarding process, for example, like COVID vaccination certificates. So we're complying with all of
Mm-hmm.
council's requirements for volunteers. And we have optional verification for working with children's checks as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been really helpful to have a really consistent flow where every volunteer goes through the same onboarding process, gets asked the same questions, and has to provide the same credentials,
Mm-hmm.
so that when they arrive on site, we can be confident that we have all of the information we need for
Mm-hmm.
that volunteer to be a part of the program safely. And that includes even like really basic things like emergency contacts, because our
Mm-hmm.
supervisors can then access those emergency contacts through the
Yeah.
Rosterfy backend. Yeah.
Yeah. So having that confidence. And do you find that with Rosterfy and having that oversight of like what stage every volunteer is at? I know we spoke about bottlenecks before, but you've been able to reduce some of that bottlenecking and kind of increase that speed of getting volunteers in with everything that they need.
Yeah, definitely. It's in it's increased the speed, but probably more importantly for us, it's reduced the amount of human touch points in the process,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Right.
which has allowed us to scale up our marketing, because previously we were limited by how many people we could manually process ourselves.
Yeah.
And now it's almost entirely automated. We do have one human touch point so that we try to introduce
Mm-hmm.
the volunteer to the convener who runs the site. So we are getting that
Yep.
human connection. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, it's really helped us to scale by taking the admin workload out of it.
Yeah, so removing all the times that humans were involved, they didn't need to be, whether that's grabbing the right kind of forms or the right kind of compliance forms to send through, and actually just making it a lot more convenient for volunteers to get the information they need straight up, and then empowering your team to have the conversations that are actually, human connection conversations, to say, we're so excited to have you here. Thank you for handing in everything. That's great. So we've found that councils, as well as many other organisations, struggle with the manual juggle of that child safety compliance as well. So how are you currently handling credential verification during onboarding? And specifically, do you have like a branched workflow in place to manage the unique compliance and parental consent requirements, for those volunteers that might be under 18?
Yeah. So our program accepts under 18s as part of the program, but they have to be accompanied by an adult when they're on site.
Yep.
And so to make sure this happens, if you sign up to our program, if you're under 18 when you sign up, you actually go through a different onboarding process, and there's a different workflow for our under 18s. And as part of that
Nice.
process, you will have to enter your parent's name, and your parent will actually have to make an account in the Rosterfy system, which will then be linked to the child's account. So we always know who the child is and who the person that is responsible for them, and the contact details as well of the adult, so that we know that any children who are going to be like interested themselves are going to have their responsible guardian with them when they actually show up on site.
Yeah, and that's must be really handy to have that built in early into the process. You're not scrambling at the end trying to find the right people.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes a difference for us because we primarily, our program focuses on adults.
Yeah.
And so we don't often think about child safety in that sort of onboarding process, because the focus of the program is on working with adults, but children are welcome. So it's good that when children do try to join the program, that they go through again that consistent workflow and consistent onboarding process. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for the work that you do with Bush Care, it must be, in terms of volunteering opportunities, something that I imagine excites a lot of those younger people under the age of 18. You know, they often do want to get stuck into sort of environmental work. It's a big theme these days for young people. So I imagine giving them that access, making it more accessible for them, and then also making it more accessible for your team, that it's not adding an entirely different, layer of admin work in order to have them along. Yeah, I can imagine that's been really impactful.
Yeah, definitely. I actually started as a volunteer with the council where I grew up. And when I graduated, someone said, "Oh, you can get paid for this," and I said, "Oh, look at this." And that was the start of my career journey. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always a big believer in bringing in young people into the program and telling them, like,
Yeah.
look, this could be your future work experience. Your supervisor could be
Yeah.
your first reference. And yeah, so it's been awesome to see young people find the program on their own and sign up and get stuck in.
Yeah. Incredible. Councils often report on hours worked, but obviously that's a number. How are you using Rosterfy to translate those hours into community impact or environmental value that resonates with council executives?
Yeah, so the hours one is tracking the hours is a big deal for us, because we actually convert the total hours of our volunteers into a dollar value.
Mm-hmm.
And the accountants really appreciate that. And I think last year our total value of volunteer services to the council in just the bushcare area was about $350,000,
Wow.
which is a really good return on investment for the program. But sort of as
Yeah.
well as the hours reporting, we have our supervisors on site. They'll complete a form in Rosterfy that sort of
Mm-hmm.
discusses all of the works that were completed on site, how many bags
Mm-hmm.
of weeds were removed, how many bags of rubbish, um,
Wow.
all of the sort of themes of what they're working on and what weeds they're working on. And we always try and convert those numbers into numbers that members of the public can really say, oh wow, this is a program that's doing good work. So last year, I think our volunteers removed 3.5 elephants worth of green waste from our
Wow.
bushland reserves, which is I think about
An
just what
amazing story
10
to
metric
tell, right?
tons.
In that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, and we really find that, like, having numbers is good, but being able to tell the stories of what those numbers are doing is in many ways more important. Um,
Absolutely.
and yeah.
Awesome. Looking forward, how does having this level of data allow you to shift from being reactive, so filling gaps, to being proactive, so being able to target specific community outcomes, for example?
Yeah, well, it's really helped us identify a lot of the areas that we've been falling short, and some of
Mm-hmm.
that's geographically, like um, some of our sites are going great guns and have active volunteers and doing lots of
Mm-hmm.
work every session, and some of our sites are um, not doing so well, and that's been really helpful for us to um, really focus our efforts for marketing and onboarding in those areas to try and build up those groups so that they can become healthy and self-sustaining. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's been really helpful for us. Parramatta's a rapidly changing LGA. The population is
Mm-hmm.
expected to double in the next 20 or so years, and that's going to bring a lot of challenges to us
Yeah.
because the traditional volunteer lived in a semi-detached house that backed onto bushland, and they were almost sort of working in their backyard.
Mm.
But the new volunteers that are going to be coming in, they're going to be living in high rises. They might have
Yeah.
to, commute or walk to their sites. And so having the data about what's working for our volunteer program is really important for us to try and connect with that next generation of volunteers.
Yeah. And what's your current demographic? Like how far across does it span?
It's pretty broad. We have families bringing their 5 and 6 year old kids to bush care,
Wow.
which
Cool.
is just, yeah, so fantastic. And I was at a birthday party at Bush Care. Someone had their birthday party at Bush Care. It was their 91st birthday last month. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's really broad. It tends, as I feel like a lot of volunteer programs do, to skew towards the recently retired,
Yeah.
and people who have that time. But yeah, more and more, I'm seeing young people getting involved with the program and young families, and it's just
Yeah.
fantastic to see.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, final question from me before we've had a couple come through. What is the one manual task that you've automated that gave your supervisors the most breathing room back in their day?
I think that the thing for the supervisors has been centralizing all of their information and sort of forms and reporting into one place, so they
Yeah.
don't have to go looking for information if they need to know. Um, for example, like all of our sites have a plan of the work, and so
Mm-hmm.
the plan of the work is in the same location as all of the places they need to report, is in the same
Yeah.
location as the volunteer information and the volunteer emergency contact information. And so for
Mm-hmm.
them on site, it's less time looking around for things in various folders and whatever. It's just
Mm-hmm.
all there on the dashboard for the supervisors. And so they can spend more time actually doing bush care and engaging with the volunteers.
Yeah, which is super important for your admins on the ground. We work with a lot of organizations, whether or not it's within councils or not, that talk about, I think reducing the burden, the administrative burden on their local admins or their local volunteer leads, to say actually to empower them to do what they love to do, because you really risk that burnout otherwise of people who get into these roles because they're so passionate about it and they love what they do, and then they've got so much of their administrative stuff to do that it takes away some of the passion that comes from their role. So freeing them up to do, and I suppose enabling them to have, equipping them with all the tools that they need so they can actually continue with that passion and do it, with all the information at their fingertips is really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And for us, bush care is quite an offline activity. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was important to us that people could engage with the platform as much on the actual day itself. They can engage as much or as little as they want to. And
Yeah.
the supervisor is the one that is completing those basic admin tasks and getting that data to us that we need.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, less time spent looking for things and more time spent actually pulling out weeds
Delivering.
and giving instruction.
Yeah. Of course. Awesome. Now we've had a couple of questions come through. What recommendations would you give to volunteer managers in city councils? So quite a broad question there, but anything that you feel like's really worked for you?
Oh, yeah, that is a broad question. So uh, I guess my recommendations would be to really, really listen to your volunteers and go
Mhm,
out and as much as possible spend the time talking to them, listening to their experiences, and also just observing the way that they do
mhm,
things. I think it's really important for programs like ours to be community and volunteer led.
mhm.
And some of these volunteers on in Parramatta have been doing bush care for longer than I've been alive.
Yeah,
And it would be wild for me to come in and expect to know things
yeah,
better than they do for their specific patch. And so yeah, for me, one of the things I really liked about Rosterfy is that cutting back on the time spent on admin meant I could spend more time on site
yeah.
talking to our volunteers and engaging in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you were saying before as well around getting all the reporting metrics through to actually see what is this, what are we actually seeing, what are we actually being told by the data, and then mixed with actually connecting with volunteers on the ground and hearing from them their firsthand experience. That's a really great blend of, then your call to action is to, okay, where do we take it from here? Both those two things are super powerful. Um, how there's a question in here around volunteer retention and whether you feel like Rostify is supported with that.
Yeah, so we I think the volunteer retention's like there's a lot going on. I think a lot
Yeah,
of the steps that you make, I think the best way to have volunteer retention is to have good actions like on in the time that people are volunteering.
yeah,
Rostify does a really good job for us of um, scheduling reminders
yeah,
and automating that process of just letting people know that it's happening and
yeah,
building that habit of showing up to volunteer. Because we find that once we can get people, if we can get someone for their first day, they're more likely to stay for their second day. And if they can get them for the second, we can get them for the third. And
yeah,
once you've done 4 sessions, you're volunteer for life. And
yeah,
so yeah, really hitting that scheduling and automating that scheduling was important for us for that retention, but also
mhm,
keeping track of like when we every time a volunteer gets checked in our system, it records the date they were last checked in. So we have really
right,
good data of how long it's been since someone's volunteered, and if
mm,
someone's been a consistent volunteer for 5 or 6 months, um, and has suddenly dropped off, and we haven't seen them for a while, we might give them a call and say, "Hey, what's up?" And
yeah,
sometimes the answer is, "I've moved out of Sydney, and I forgot to tell you guys." And it's like, "Okay,
yeah,
cool, no worries." And sometimes
yeah.
that call really gets people to re-engage.
Absolutely. And I think within volunteer organizations, it can be really hard, like, actually understanding what of your volunteers may be at risk of dropping off. And sometimes it is because they've moved, but sometimes it's because they just have lost motivation or they haven't had a good experience one off time and they're starting to churn, we might say, and not and actually picking up the phone is super powerful. But unless you've got that data in front of you or someone, a system sort of waving a flag saying, hey, you need to pay attention to this, it can be really hard. You go 6 months down the track and you say, hey, we've actually not seen Sally in a long time. Where did she drop off? Just because, as volunteer managers or coordinators, you got 10 balls in the air, and that can sometimes be the first thing that gets missed. That's what I hear from other organizations as well. um, awesome. And what do you think the future of your bush care program is?
I think we're really focusing on giving people alternate ways to volunteer than sort of showing up month to month, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
really consistent way of volunteering. So we're trying to upscale our corporate volunteering program and sort of leverage a lot of
Yeah,
the corporate group interest in community social responsibility and sort of giving people a way that they can drop in and drop out on an interest basis rather than sort
mm-hmm.
of show loyalty to a specific site which they'll be with forever. Because we
Yeah,
think that's as people move towards living in high rises, it's going to be less about working in the patch that's behind my house and more
yeah,
about going to different places and experiencing different parts of the LGA.
yeah, absolutely. Great. We're almost, I think, at time. So what I'll do is just flick across to the next slide. We'll have a recording of the session as well. So if there's any questions, other questions that come through that we've missed, we'll forward them on to Billy and we'll come back to you. But yeah, obviously a very short and sharp session today, but Billy, we're very grateful for you for coming along and having a chat. It was extremely insightful. I think everyone would have got a lot out of the session. If you're curious to learn more about Rosterfy, or also keen, if you think you've got a story to tell and you'd like to join one of our future webinars, we'd love to hear from you. You can scan this QR code here and it will take you through to a contact us page. And yeah, we'd absolutely love to connect and discuss what that might look like. And here are my contact details as well. But otherwise, thank you everyone for sharing your lunch break with us. It's great to have you here. We'll have the recording that we'll share out for anyone that missed it. And thank you again to Billy for joining, and we hope to see you all again on our next session.